Batman Begins is the perfect origin story. A movie that's garnered high praise from critics, but has relatively fallen under the radar compared to other Batman movies. I remember watching this movie when I was a child and absolutely falling in love with Christopher Nolan's adaptation of the character. Back then, I never fully understood what the themes of fear and anxiety meant in this movie when I was a kid, but as I've gotten older, I've resonated with how humanized this version of Bruce Wayne and Batman truly is. Realizing he isn't just some vigilante with a lot of money, but a layered man struggling with personal issues of fear and vengeance. In this delicious take, I talk about how Christopher Nolan adapted the best on-screen origin of the Batman we've seen yet, and how he developed his character into the titular hero the world loves.
Don't be afraid.
Not many people like seeing the beginnings of superhero origin stories. I guess it's because we've all been accustomed to how certain heroes' motivations start out, or we're just plain tired of seeing them. However, I really like how Nolan introduces Bruce within this movie, and I like the introduction to the character's main theme being fear. Within the first establishing scene, we get introduced to Bruce's fear of bats, and how the darkness is something he seems not to want to steer toward when he's fallen into the well. Nolan plays with the thought of how demonizing his fear of bats is, and then you get flash forwarded to present tense, where the bats aren't a symbol to Bruce yet, but just another nightmare. It really shows that he hasn't fully embraced his vigilantism yet and is still consumed by his fears, even after his parents' death. Although he hasn't overcome his fears yet, it doesn't mean his rage for what's happened in his life has ceased. He's quick to start fights, and as soon as he's able to find a way to get out of the hellscape of prison, he takes that chance with Ra's al Ghul, who shows him how to be the better man and introduces him to self-reflect and actually assess what truly bothers him. When we're first introduced to Ra's, he's already self-assessed what kind of man Bruce is at that point in time. Because Bruce is still blinded by his revenge quest, his personal actions have landed him in prison to try and fight off the criminals that plague the world, those like the man who killed his parents. I really like how Nolan sets up the first 5 minutes of this movie because it establishes the main motivators behind who Bruce is, just a boy who's still scarred from the trauma in his early life, and the fear that resides within him he hasn't overcome yet. The establishing dialogue between Ra's and Bruce is so meaningful too, that it sets up who Bruce will strive to become over the course of the whole trilogy.
If you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if they can't stop you, then you become something else entirely.
Which is?
Legend, Mr. Wayne.
But hold on, let's go back a second. Why is Bruce so deathly afraid of bats? Well, Nolan constructs it in a really cool way. To put it simply, he and his parents were at a play, and Bruce refused to watch the play due to his association with bats. And well, since it was established in the first shot, he's definitely afraid of them because of falling down the well. People tend to associate something fearful to an event that holds a lot of trauma to them. And for Bruce, whenever he thinks or sees bats, it's just a reminder that he wasn't strong enough to defend his parents, and the agony he feels for thinking it was his fault for getting the ones he loved hurt. And this is what stems Bruce's commitment to pursue a life of trying to stop and fight injustice. But ultimately, his fears still hold him back from who he truly can become this early on in the movie. And it's why Ra's points this out.
Tell us, Mr. Wayne, what do you fear?
But what we learn is that Bruce's guilt for his parents' death is heavily outweighed by his anger for what happened. And so far, Bruce's principles for justice have come in the form of anger. That's why he tried to threaten Falcone, fight criminals in prison, and almost murder Joe Chill at his trial. Before even putting on a literal mask, he's been hiding behind a sheet of anger that he didn't or couldn't understand how to control. And that is why Ra's helped to make Bruce understand himself, so he can turn into the hero we see later in the movie. The anger that persists within Bruce has become so detrimental to his way of life that even Ra's points this out in this very beautifully written piece of dialogue.
You're stronger than your father,
You didn't know my father.
but I know the rage that drives you. That impossible anger strangling the grief until the memory of your loved one is just poison in your veins. And one day you catch yourself wishing the person you loved had never existed. So you'll be spared your pain. Your anger gives you great power. But if you let it will destroy you. As it almost did me.
Bruce's bottled up aggression has been made clear when the movie presents us with Bruce's inner thoughts on what justice means when it flashes back to his conversations with Rachel after Joe Chill was murdered. And we get the first glimpse of how influential a hero like Batman could be in the future if Bruce gives up his devious and vengeful ways.
My parents deserve justice.
Well, you're not talking about justice, you're talking about revenge.
Sometimes they're the same.
No, they're never the same, Bruce. Justice is about harmony, revenge is about you making yourself feel better.
The first act of this movie does a phenomenal job at building up Bruce's fear, realizing that everything in his life so far has been surrounded by it or influenced by it since his childhood. His unrelenting pursuit to drive out his anger is only met by more and more backlash as he realizes that he doesn't really know what he's doing. Sure, he has somewhat of an idea, but it's clouded with his misguided desire to stop criminals because of his anger, instead of a passion needed to help rebuild the city and be a beacon to those who are feeling hopeless. A dark night. It's through the final stage of Bruce's training we start to see the mindset which he will adopt, avoiding any sort of killing because compassion sets the good guys apart from the criminals. Say what you will about this mindset or behavior, whether you believe in it or not. Christopher Nolan sets up this kind of reasoning so well because he's established the path to how this Bruce Wayne got to this conclusion. He saw what kind of mindset you have to be a criminal. He thought of killing others, but the one he chose to seek out was the way of a vigilante, someone who seeks out criminals to induce fear in them and get them off the street, but also someone who can revitalize a dying city, which becomes Bruce's main mission in Acts 2 and 3 of the movie. But he can't do that without overcoming the one fear that's been repressing him since the night of his parents' death. The first Batcave scene we see since his early days is a shifting point for Bruce within the movie. For the first act, we noticed how integral helping the city and getting justice for those who hurt others is, but it was all clouded in a misguided attempt of getting revenge. And it wasn't until stepping into this cave and standing amongst the things he feared the most that he's able to turn what was once a nightmare into the beginnings of a symbol. You can see the breathing techniques Bruce uses to calm himself down in this situation, becoming aware of the fear-induced trauma he's experiencing, and while he stands up, Hans Zimmer's score blazes in your ears to instruct the viewer that what you're witnessing is a man who is fully conquering the fears that have held him back for decades. It's a beautiful way to catalyze Batman's origin story, and Nolan does a wonderful job of visualizing that for the screen. Bruce can't become the hero the city needed until he conquered the fear of bats that's been associated to his parents' death for years. I really like this about Bruce's character. He's seen doing heroic things and is still as strong as ever before this scene, but it's not until he overcomes his mental faults that he can step out of the cave a new man, and ultimately share his fears with others.
Why bats, Master Wayne?
Bats frighten me. This time my enemies shared my dread.
I've been saving Scarecrow's involvement in this movie because I needed to explain the importance of Bruce's involvement with fear first, before I delve deep into the perfect involvement of having a physical embodiment of fear with Dr. Crane, killing Murphy's Scarecrow. Scarecrow is a perfect antagonist for this movie, alongside Ra's and Falcone. Each villain mentioned holds some part in Bruce's psyche. Scarecrow with his fear, Falcone with cleaning up the city, and Ra's with justice. All hold a part in enacting Bruce with an opposite sense of morality. That's what Nolan does so well with this movie, having opposing figures with similar values as Batman does, but slightly altered so that we as an audience can tell where Bruce will fall. It's really interesting to see. I'm sure a few people may even understand the motivations for these villains too, and that's what makes for an even better story. So when Batman is first introduced within the movie, it makes for the most entertaining spectacle.
What the hell are you?
I'm Batman.
But when you pair Bruce up with someone immune of changing, like Ra's, who's completely stuck in his ways, or Falcone, it leads to very interesting conflicts that the movie does well at portraying. Or you force Batman to go toe-to-toe with the foe who enacts the deepest fears in him, like Scarecrow, you get an alarming character detail in Bruce like no other. When Bruce is sprayed with Scarecrow's fear toxin, it shakes him back to when he was just that little boy yearning to see his parents again. And when he's in deep distress, who does he call? He calls the one man who's always looked after him since the beginning. It's such a good scene, such a good callback, and great character developing moments right here. The movie's use of slowly building up Bruce's defining character traits is a remarkable thing to witness as a viewer. And it's how Nolan relays this built up character that we as an audience feel more passionate about his character development by the end of the movie. But it isn't until Bruce is forced to confront Ra's, a former mentor of his past, that he truly embarks on the final transformation as the hero we all know.
Why do we force? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
At this point in the movie, Bruce has been using his money and skills to act as a vigilante, helping the police if it serves his purpose of figuring out who's behind the destruction of Gotham. Still, when Rachel is poisoned, he takes the first steps to becoming that symbol, that hero we know. His early days of being Batman are starting to be heard around the city. Crooks, police, and citizens of Gotham know who he is at this point. When Ra's shows up to Bruce's party unannounced, you get a striking conversation between them that articulates Bruce's growth over this movie wonderfully, but also illustrates how Raz's morals are very tactful, and not much could throw him off of his game.
When I found you in that jail, you were lost. But I believed in you. I took away your fear, and I showed you a path. You are my greatest student. it should be you standing by my side, saving the world.
I'll be standing where I belong. Between you and the people of Gotham.
I love how Nolan writes this, Roz. He's very comic accurate in terms of his convictions. Skin color? Maybe not. But the fact he is Bruce, if he had no moral code, is fun to see put together in a movie. This constant back and forth between ideologies makes for an exciting conflict, especially when the movie reaches its final act, and Batman needs to save Gotham from Roz's plan of destroying the city with Scarecrow's fear toxin. These two characters clearly have distinct ideologies, not too far away from each other, where they see justice as a way of cleaning up the scum that runs the city, but the methods of how that is done is where the two clash. Roz believes the only way to remove a virus in the city is by burning it down, where Batman believes in being compassionate and letting the good people learn from their mistakes and grow the city into becoming a better place. Of course, the fighting is pretty cool, and the set pieces like the train blowing up is awesome to see, but seeing two characters exhibit such clear and distinct morals and having them go toe-to-toe is what makes the final fight so convincing to me. But how convenient this final fight is based on a moving train that has no brakes on a monorail going through the city? I feel like I've seen this somewhere. But because of this, Bruce finally lets go of this member of his past, who glues him down to who he once was and not who he wants to be. He lets go of the man trying to burn him down and instead finds himself in a phase of rebuilding his legacy, rebuilding his relationships, and fully embracing the new symbol he's built upon the city, and using that power to do some good. Batman is now a part of Gotham, and he'll do whatever it takes to bring some light into the dark, even if it needs a dark knight to do it. Christopher Nolan needed to reinvent the Batman character after the flop that was Batman and Robin, and he made a timeless Batman story that will never be forgotten. Due to the nature of The Dark Knight, this movie is constantly forgotten about whenever anyone mentions top-tier Batman stories. This movie is genuinely brilliant, and Nolan's screenplay here is top-notch stuff. Seeing your hero deal with failure, deal with fears, and go up against a foe whose ideologies mimic closely to the other was fascinating to watch. Each time I watch this movie, I remember why it's such a good origin story, and to me, one of the best origin stories of all time. I really hope all of you take a minute to rewatch this movie. It still holds up to this day very well. From the set pieces to the practical effects, the acting, I mean, this whole cast is still my favorite interpretation of the characters. Christian Bale, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, Liam Neeson, Cillian Murphy, and Katie Holmes are goddamn treasures. Everything about it works, and it's why it deserves all the love it can get. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Movies like these remind me why I love superhero stuff so much. It's just insane to me how we could still have movies like this today if we continue to critique the slop we get nowadays. Superhero movies shouldn't be categorized as superhero films. They should just be recognized as films. And to me, Batman Begins is a damn good film. What are your thoughts on this movie? Do you like it as much as I do? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing what you all have to say, so please go ahead and say what you want. I'm glad you are all still here with me watching, and I'll see you all very soon for another upload. Stay tuned. That's all from me today, guys. Peace out.